Methodist preacher.
Well,
So,
you have always been what I call an evangelical type preacher, and whether that's Methodist or Presbyterian or Lutheran really doesn't matter.
that's right.
In German it's called evangelisch, and over there they only have two religions that they distinguish: katholisch oder evangelisch. You've been evangelisch, and as such have served the total Christian community.
I always like to put the fire in the opposite and give it all I had. So.
That's right. You certainly did.
And when I was here, after Clarksville joined, it meant that I had 3 sermons every Sunday to preach, and usually a young people's meeting at evening before the evening service, so that. And lots of times I was foolish enough to preach 3 different sermons every Sunday.
3 different ones that you had to prepare for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't surprise me. Again, you had enormous status. You still do. You had enormous status in the communities. Enormous effects. Now, I was not a member of your church. I was a member of the Reformed, as we called it. And we used to have competitions with the children of the evangelical and the Lutheran church, and we always felt that our Christmas pageants were, because Rudy Coleman directed them, were more, got a better audience of a reaction than the other 2 churches, and in fact they did. But your church was right on Christianity, and Reverend Schechterly and Reverend Springman also kept the evangelical church. Now we were too, but we used adaptations. We used, shall we say, we were progressive, but nevertheless we respected your church. We would always go to your church at Christmas time, as was the tendencies in the community. Everyone would go to everyone else's church at Christmas time for the Christmas pageants, Christmas plays. So I had many occasions, you see, and other holidays, to come and see you, even though I was not not a Lutheran. But outside of your pastoring, the counseling that you had to give people, I mean, all of the baptisms and funerals and so on, but besides that, the counseling that you gave people, perhaps this may be unfair, but did you ever have any advice to Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or 4-H or youth groups, or did you ever have occasion to go speak besides catechism and church work with non-church groups? Perhaps the Beaver Vocational High School FFA or anything like that, at their banquets and that sort of thing.
I never did. Although I took part in commencement exercises.
Oh yes.
And
yes.
When I was at Lairdsville, I was invited several times to come into the school in different classes and talk to the pupils, and I enjoyed that very much because they were thinking that we were doing something worthwhile with the young people in our parish, and the teachers would like if I would come in and tell them what we were doing and why we were able to do it, and why we were able to get young people to cooperate the way they did.
Well, I remember you at many graduations and commencements when I was both student and teacher, and I've forgotten about that part of it.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that I saw you during the wartime years giving either the benediction or performing some functions at honor rolls or something of that nature.
Yeah. Well, I think you talk about the war times. I like to say that while I was here and while the war was going on, there was never a time when any boy ever left any of my congregations but that I wasn't there when he got on the bus to leave. Now sometimes that was early in the morning, sometimes late at night. Didn't matter when it was, didn't matter what kind of weather. If there was some boy out of my congregation was going out in the service, I was there. And I can remember how they would try to make it a little bit jolly, but after all, when you come down and stand in the street and the snow's and sleet's falling around you, and a father takes you on one arm and a son on the other, and the dad bowed his head and said, "Won't you say just one more prayer for my boy before he leaves?" Well, that's something that my part of the ministry that I'm just so proud that I was able to do it.
People might not understand how we Americans were really all pulling together during World War II.
Right.
We were a unified country, and of course, you having experienced being away from home and the loneliness of school could appreciate the even greater stresses that one faces when he goes away in the military in wartime circumstances.
Another thing I did during the war, of course, we had the honor roll, but once a month, in a special prayer, I called the name of every boy in that congregation that was in the service and offered a special prayer for that boy and his parents. At least once a month. And we were constantly sending out letters and material to them, wherever they were.
I can only say that later on I was one of them, and I know how much that, I was away from home. I know how much. I got a card one time where all the members of the Sunday school class signed it. It was the most precious possession I had overseas.
Yeah.
Did you have any occasion to have to counsel a Gold Star mother, that is a mother who lost a son?
Yes. Yes. Mrs. Emma
Musser?
Musser. I had the service for her boy. And
Was that in Beavertown here?
that was in Troxaville.
Oh, at Troxville.
And I also had a memorial service for Thomas boy here in Beavertown.
Oh, yes. Les Thomas's brother, I don't remember. How about Frank Gill's brother? Was he, I don't remember Frank Gill's brother's name, but that would have been at Troxvilleville. Was Frank Gill in your church over there?
Yeah, oh, yes.
But he was killed in the breakout at St. Lo on D-Day, in France in 1944. But I don't know when he was buried or had any ceremony. Perhaps that was held elsewhere.
It was.
Well, you had the Depression to contend with, and then, of course, World War II, which was the greatest event in my life. World War II, it still is the greatest event that's occurred in my life, and perhaps in yours as well. And then we had the after-war year, the happy years, when all the people had cars and refrigerators and movies, and all of this pent-up demand could be released. And I'm sure that must have been a challenge for a pastor, especially an evangelical pastor.
That's right. And the challenge of, I was just thinking as I was coming down, the challenge of working with young people. All of my ministry, as I said before, I think, I've been in close contact with young people. I've had young people's groups, and when I was here, we would have a young people's meeting. In those days, there were no school buses. These young people would walk home maybe a mile, and they'd walk back to church that night for a mile for a young people's meeting. And we would have, once a month, we would have young people's meeting in different churches all over the county. And there was never a time but what our parish, and that included, we would invite the United Church of Christ, but we could fill at least 2 buses each time to go to those young people's meetings. And I just thought that was wonderful. And even in my last parish, Sunday evening, it was nothing to have 30 or 40 young people come out Sunday evening after Sunday evening after Sunday evening to take part in a program which they planned themselves, even though their preacher was an old preacher by that time, but just to work with those young people.
Are you referring to yourself as the old preacher?
I'm referring to myself as
You
the
know,
old, as the
sir,
old
you have
preacher.
not aged. I know you have, but relatively, you have not aged since the first time I saw you, probably in 1935 sometime. You've remained. How old are you?
I'm 79.
79.
Yeah.
You know, we had an interview with Mr. Ira Gross, he was a delightful interview. I guess he's, what, 91? And he doesn't look 91. We're having an interview with you, 79.
Yeah.
You don't look 79. You don't even, you don't look or act more than 59. And for that, of course, your genes are probably partly responsible, but your other qualities of living
I'm grateful.
yeah, I'm sure that I would be, and we should all be. Perhaps your good service to man, though, played a role in it. I'm sure it has. Why, when you first came to Beavertown, we had a brick plant and a silk mill, and but those things weren't going too well because it was a depression. And now here you've chosen Beavertown to retire in. When did you retire, sir?
Retired in 69.
1969.
April 69.
Perhaps I'm jumping the gun. Let's go back to Beavertown. You are the central Snyder County area here. You came in 1935. When did you leave our area then?
I left in 61.